many people out there have been speculating on, that Meghan Markle has lied about her age. Is she actually older?
There is a photograph that Thomas Markle kept on his wall for years. 2 daughters, different mothers, different ages, different lives that intersected for a period of time in a family home in California before each of them went in a direction the other never quite followed. One of those daughters became the Duchess of Sussex. The other became the woman the world knows as Meghan's difficult half-sister, the one who went on television, the one who filed the lawsuits, the one who said things that made people uncomfortable and was largely dismissed for saying them. But here is the question that has stayed with me throughout this entire story, and it is not the question most people ask when they talk about Samantha Markle. The question is not whether Samantha is right or wrong about Meghan. The question is what it actually feels like to watch your younger half-sister become one of the most famous women in the world and have her tell that world that you are essentially a stranger. If that question means something to you, and I suspect it might, then stay with me, because this story goes somewhere that most coverage of the Markle family has never been willing to go. And if you are new here and you want this kind of honest, careful storytelling about the royal world every week, I would love for you to subscribe. It is right there, one tap, and it means a great deal. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not 2018, not the wedding, further back than that. Thomas Markle Sr. had 2 families. The first gave him Samantha and Thomas Jr., the second gave him Meghan. By the time Meghan was born in 1981, Samantha was already 17, already largely grown, already living a life that had moved on from the family home in significant ways. Samantha has spoken in interviews about remembering the day Meghan was brought home. She described her as the ship Meghan flower docking at the house. There was warmth in that description. There was also, underneath it, the acknowledgement of distance. 17 years between 2 half-siblings is not a small gap. It is almost a generation, the kind of gap where the older child has already formed their identity before the younger one has even learned to walk. And that distance, geographical, emotional, generational, is the context that most of the coverage of this family completely ignores. Because when Meghan sat with Oprah Winfrey in 2021 and said she grew up as an only child, the statement that Samantha filed a defamation lawsuit over, the statement that a judge ultimately ruled was a matter of opinion rather than verifiable fact, the people who were outraged on Samantha's behalf were largely people who had not thought carefully about what growing up as an only child might have meant to Meghan. Not technically an only child, nobody disputes that. Thomas Sr. had older children. Meghan knew them. There were visits. There were family occasions. There is photographic evidence of a relationship that existed in some form. But emotionally, experientially, in the daily texture of childhood, Meghan grew up in a home with one parent, then another, navigating a divorce, navigating her mother's world, navigating what it meant to be a mixed-race girl in Los Angeles in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And Samantha was not in that house, was not part of that daily experience, was not the older sister who was there when things were hard. And this is the part that most people missed. When Meghan said she grew up as an only child, she may not have been making a statement about Samantha's existence. She may have been making a statement about her own experience of childhood. Those are not the same thing, and the difference between them is the difference between a lie and a perspective. Now, that does not mean Samantha's pain was not real, because here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Samantha Markle had a life before Meghan became famous. She had children, she had relationships, she had a professional identity that had nothing to do with her younger half-sister. And then Meghan married a prince, and overnight Samantha's identity was rewritten for her, not by her own choices, by the gravitational pull of someone else's extraordinary story. She became Meghan's difficult half-sister, the one who went on television, the one who said the things that made people cringe, and everything she had been before, the mother, the woman, the person with her own complicated and imperfect life, disappeared beneath that single defining label. there is something genuinely worth sitting with there, and I say this as someone who has followed this story carefully and tried to be fair to everyone in it. What does it do to a person, to a woman in her 50s, in her 60s, trying to navigate the ordinary difficulties of life, to have your identity reduced to a footnote in someone else's fairy tale, to have your name become shorthand for a particular kind of bitterness or jealousy or dysfunction in the minds of people who have never met you and know nothing about your actual life? Samantha filed 3 defamation lawsuits against Meghan. All 3 were dismissed. The final dismissal came in March 2024. The judge ruled that Meghan's statements about her childhood and her relationship with Samantha were matters of opinion rather than verifiable fact, which is the legal standard, which is the correct standard to apply. But legal standards and human standards are not the same thing. Because here is what Samantha's lawyer said that has stayed with me. He said, the part that is missed in this whole thing is that they are acting as if there was no harm that came from these statements. She now faces online comments of Meghan's lying sister, and she never lied about anything. She never lied about anything. That is what her own lawyer said. Not that she was always right, not that her behavior was always dignified or appropriate or well judged, but that the specific label that the world attached to her, liar, was not earned. And when you think about this audience, when you think about women who have navigated complicated family relationships, who have experienced being misrepresented by people who had more power or more platform or more of the world's sympathy than they did, that statement has a particular kind of resonance. Most of us have not had our family disagreements played out in front of 2 billion people. Most of us have not had a judge rule on whether our version of a childhood memory constitutes defamation. Most of us have not watched a sibling become a global icon while we remained an ordinary person with ordinary problems. But most of us know something about what it feels like to be the one the story is not told from, to be the sister who is named in the book but doesn't get to write it, to be the family member whose perspective is inconvenient to the narrative everyone else has agreed upon. Samantha Markle is not a sympathetic figure in the traditional sense. She has said things that were unkind. She has made choices in how she handled the public attention around this story that were not always wise or measured. She has, at times, seemed to seek the very spotlight she resented not having access to through her sister. But none of that makes her wrong about the thing that matters most, which is that she existed, that she was there, that the family was more complicated than the story Meghan told allowed for. And now, in 2026, with the lawsuits behind her and the public attention largely moved on, Samantha Markle is still Thomas Markle's daughter, still the older half-sister of the Duchess of Sussex, still living with whatever the last 8 years of this story have done to her sense of herself and her place in the world. The photograph on Thomas Markle's wall: 2 daughters, one famous, one not. I do not know whether they will ever find their way back to something that resembles a relationship. I do not know whether Meghan ever thinks about her half-sister on a quiet morning in Montecito. I do not know whether Samantha has made peace with the way her story became entangled with someone else's far more visible one. What I do know is that the Markle family story, in all its imperfect, painful, very human complexity, is a story about what fame does to ordinary relationships, about what happens when one member of a family steps into a completely different world and the people left behind have to find a new way to understand who they are in relation to someone they can no longer reach. That happens in families that have nothing to do with royalty. It happens quietly, without cameras, without lawsuits, without Oprah, and perhaps that's why this particular story has resonated so deeply with so many people for so long, because somewhere in the Markle family history, beneath all the headlines and the legal filings and the television interviews, there are just 2 women who share a father and a photograph on a wall, and a distance between them that neither of them, perhaps, entirely chose. I would love to know your thoughts on this, whether you think Meghan handled the family story fairly, whether you feel any sympathy for Samantha's position, whether you have experienced something in your own family that made this story feel familiar in some way. Leave a comment below, because conversations like this one are the reason I make these videos, and I read every single one. Before we go any further, I want to take just a moment to say something directly to you. If you have found your way to this channel, you are probably someone who has followed the royal family for a long time. You remember watching Charles and Diana. You watched William grow up. You were there for the weddings and the funerals and all the moments in between that made the royal family feel, in some strange way, like people you actually knew. And now you are here, watching the next chapter unfold, the one that nobody could have predicted, the one that has divided opinion more sharply than anything the royal family has produced in decades. This channel exists for people like you, not to tell you what to think, not to push you toward a conclusion that has already been decided before the evidence is examined, but to go through the story carefully, honestly, and with the respect that you deserve as someone who has been paying attention for a very long time. If that is what you are looking for, if you want a place where the royal story is told fairly, where both sides are given a proper hearing, and where the human truth is valued more than the dramatic headline, then I would genuinely love for you to be part of this community. Subscribe right now. It is just one tap, and it means that every time a new video goes up, you will be the first to know. Now, I have a question for you, and I want your honest answer in the comments below. When you think about the women at the center of the royal story right now, Meghan and Catherine, where does your heart land? Some people watch this story and find themselves drawn to Meghan, to what she represents, to the courage it takes to walk away from something that was hurting you, to the woman who looked at one of the most powerful institutions in the world and said, "This is not working for me," and meant it. Others watch the same story and find themselves drawn to Catherine, to the quiet consistency, to the decades of showing up and doing the work without complaint, to the woman who has faced her own extraordinary difficulties in recent years with a dignity that has genuinely moved people. There is no wrong answer. Both women are complicated. Both have qualities worth admiring. Both have made choices that not everyone agrees with. So tell me honestly, Meghan or Catherine, or perhaps something more nuanced than either? Leave your answer in the comments. Tell me why, because the conversations that happen below these videos are some of the most thoughtful I have encountered anywhere on the internet, and that is entirely down to you. Welcome to the channel. I'm glad you're here.